Somewhere in the forests of northern Cambodia, the trees have been growing for 600 years. Their roots spill over walls of carved sandstone like slow gray water. They wrap around doorways. They press through the seams of temples, patient and unhurried, until the stone and the wood become a single thing, impossible to separate. If you walked here in the early morning, before the heat arrives, you would hear very little. A bird, somewhere high in the canopy. The drip of last night's rain falling from leaf to leaf. The soft give of moss beneath your feet. And everywhere around you, half hidden in the green, the shapes of a city. Towers shaped like lotus buds, rising above the trees. Long galleries lined with figures frozen mid-dance. Faces, carved into stone, smiling down from every direction with their eyes closed. This is Angkor. 800 years ago, it may have been the largest city on earth. A sprawling capital of temples and canals and wooden houses, home to perhaps 750,000 people, in an age when most cities in the world held only a few tens of thousands. It was the heart of an empire that ruled much of Southeast Asia. And then, slowly, over the course of a century or more, the people left. The water that had sustained them turned against them. The forest moved in. Tonight, there is nowhere to be and nothing to do. Let the city come to you slowly. We are going to walk through the rise of Angkor, through its golden centuries, and into the long quiet of its abandonment. There is no need to follow every name or every date. Let the words move past you like the river that still runs beside these ruins, on their way to somewhere far away. This is the story of a vanished world. To understand the city, we have to go back more than 1,000 years, to a time before any of these temples existed. The land here is shaped by water. For half the year, the monsoon rains fall in warm gray sheets, and the rivers swell and overflow. For the other half, the sky is clear and the land grows dry, and the rivers shrink back into their beds. Everything that ever lived in this place had to learn the rhythm of that water. Too little and the rice would fail. Too much and the fields would drown. The people who would build Angkor were the Khmer. Their kingdoms had risen and fallen along these rivers for centuries, small and scattered, often at war with one another. Then, around the year 800, a ruler named Jayavarman II drew them together. The old inscriptions tell us he climbed a sacred mountain and there declared himself a universal king, a ruler whose authority came from the heavens and could not be challenged. Whether the ceremony happened exactly as the carvings describe, we cannot know. But from that moment, the histories mark the beginning of the empire that would last 600 years. His successors chose this plain near the Great Lake to build their capital. It was a careful choice. To the south lay the Tunnel Sap, a vast freshwater lake that swelled enormously in the wet season and shrank in the dry, leaving behind rich soil and waters thick with fish. To the north rose hills that fed clear streams down onto the plain. Here, a people who understood water could grow more rice than almost anywhere on earth. And rice was power. Rice fed armies. Rice fed the workers who would cut and haul and carve the millions of blocks of stone that this city would one day need. For the Khmer kings, building was not vanity. It was duty and it was faith. They believed the king was a bridge between the world of people and the world of the gods. To build a great temple was to bring a piece of heaven down to earth, to anchor it in the soil of the kingdom. Each king who came to the throne wanted to leave behind something greater than the king before him. A taller tower, a wider moat, a more perfect mountain of stone. Over the generations, this ambition built outward and upward across the plain, temple after temple, reservoir after reservoir, until the whole landscape had been reshaped by human hands. And at the center of it all sat the king, in a palace of wood and gold that has long since rotted away. For while the gods were given homes of everlasting stone, people, even kings, lived in wood. That is why, when you walk through Angkor today, you see only temples. The markets, the houses, the workshops, the homes of the ordinary people who made the city live, all of it was wood and thatch, and all of it is gone. What remains is only the part they built for eternity. Try, for a moment, to imagine the city as it truly was, at the height of its power around 800 or 900 years ago. You would not have seen a single dense town with walls around it, the way you might picture a medieval city in Europe. Angkor was something stranger and, in its way, more modern. It spread across the plain for hundreds of square miles, a vast low patchwork of villages and rice fields and temples, all woven together by a network of roads and canals. Some who study it now call it a sprawling garden city, or a city of water. It may have been the most extensive settlement of the entire pre-industrial world. The thing that held it all together was the management of water, and the scale of it is difficult to grasp even today. The Khmer engineers dug enormous rectangular reservoirs, called barrays, each one larger than anything you might expect from a kingdom of that age. One of them stretched roughly 5 miles long and 1.5 miles wide, a man-made lake of still water shining on the plain. From these reservoirs ran an immense web of canals and channels, carrying water out across the fields. In the wet season, the system caught the floods. In the dry season, it released the stored water slowly, keeping the rice alive when the rains were gone. This was the secret engine of the empire. With water under their control, the Khmer could grow rice not once a year, as nature allowed, but 2 or even 3 times. That surplus fed an enormous population, and it freed great numbers of people from the fields to do other work, to quarry stone, to carve, to build. The temples that astonish us today were, in a sense, made of water as much as of rock, because without the water there would have been no surplus, and without the surplus there would have been no spare hands to raise a single wall. Walk through the living city in your mind. The air is warm and heavy with the smell of cooking fires and wet earth. Along a raised earthen road, ox carts move slowly through the dust. In the rice fields, people stand bent over the green shoots, water to their ankles. Children carry baskets. Monks in saffron robes pass by in silence. Merchants from distant lands, from China and from the kingdoms of the sea, move through the markets with cloth and porcelain and spices, trading for the wax and the cardamom and the rare woods of the forest. We even have the words of one such traveler. A Chinese envoy named Zhou Daguan came to Angkor near the end of the 13th century and stayed for about a year and wrote down what he saw. He described the great processions of the king, shaded by golden parasols, guarded by soldiers and elephants. He described the houses of the people, the festivals, the food, the customs that seemed so strange to him. His account is one of the only windows we have into the daily life of the city, written by someone who actually walked its streets. Through his eyes, for a few pages, the silent stones fill again with crowds and color and noise. And rising above all of it, above the fields and the markets and the wooden houses, stood the temples. Their towers were sheathed in some places with gold, catching the sun so that from a distance they seemed to burn. To a traveler arriving across the plain, the sight must have seemed almost unreal. A city of water and gold, spread out beneath the wide tropical sky. Of all the temples the Khmer ever raised, one stands above the rest, in fame and in sheer ambition. We know it now as Angkor Wat. It was built in the first half of the 12th century, under a king named Suryavarman II. He dedicated it not to the Buddha, as you might expect in Cambodia today, but to the Hindu god Vishnu, the preserver of the universe. For in those centuries, the Khmer kings honored the great gods of India, brought to Southeast Asia long before by traders and priests, and woven deeply into the idea of kingship itself. Angkor Wat was designed as a model of the universe in stone. At its heart rise 5 towers, arranged so that they echo the shape of Mount Meru, the sacred mountain that, in the old cosmology, stands at the center of all worlds and holds up the heavens. Around this mountain of stone runs a series of walls and galleries, representing the ranges of mountains that ring the world. And around the whole vast complex lies a moat, wide and still, standing for the great ocean at the edge of everything. To walk inward toward the central towers was to journey, step by step, from the outer edge of the cosmos toward its sacred center. The scale is hard to put into words. The outer wall encloses an area large enough to hold a small town. The moat alone is more than 500 feet wide in places, a perfect rectangle of water that mirrors the towers above it. Every surface that could be carved was carved. Along the galleries run great panels of relief, stretching for hundreds of yards, telling stories from the Hindu epics. Gods and demons pulling on the body of a giant serpent to churn an ocean of milk and bring forth the elixir of immortality. Armies marching to war, heaven above and the punishments of the underworld below. And everywhere, carved into the walls in their thousands, the figures of celestial dancers, each one different, each with her own face, her own jewelry, her own quiet smile. Think of what it took to build this. Millions of blocks of sandstone, some weighing more than a ton, quarried from a mountain dozens of miles away. The stone was floated down rivers and canals on rafts, then hauled into place, very likely with the help of elephants and timber and rope and the patient labor of countless hands. There were no machines. There was only organization on an enormous scale, the same mastery of water and people and time that had built the reservoirs and the canals. It is thought that the temple took several decades to complete. Generations of workers gave their lives to it, and many would have died before they ever saw it finished. And here is something remarkable. Of all the great temples of Angkor, this one was never truly abandoned. Even after the city around it emptied, even as the forest crept over its neighbors, Angkor what remained a place of worship. In time it passed from a Hindu temple to a Buddhist one, and Buddhist monks tended it through the long centuries. Its moat held back the jungle that swallowed so much else. And so, while other temples disappeared entirely beneath the trees, the greatest of them all stood on, weathered and stained and quiet, but never forgotten. To this day, it remains the largest religious monument ever built by human beings. A few decades after Angkor Wat was finished, the empire passed through a time of crisis. A rival kingdom from the east attacked, and for a brief and shocking period the capital itself fell and was sacked. Out of that disaster rose perhaps the most famous of all the Khmer kings, a ruler named Jayavarman VII. He drove out the invaders and took the throne already an old man, and what he did next reshaped the city forever. Where his ancestors had honored the Hindu gods, Jayavarman VII was a devoted Buddhist, and he set out to build a new capital infused with his faith. He raised a great walled city, which we call Angkor Thom, the Great City, and ringed it with a moat and a high wall many miles around. At each of its gates he placed enormous stone faces, gazing out in every direction over the road. And at the very center he built the temple now known as the Bayon. It is unlike anything else at Angkor. From a distance it seems a strange and shapeless mass of stone, almost chaotic. But as you come closer, the shapes resolve, and you realize that the towers are faces. Dozens of them, vast serene faces carved into the rock. For to a tower, looking out to the north and south and east and west, more than 200 of them in all. Wherever you stand within the Bayon, a face is looking at you, eyes lowered, lips curved in the faintest of smiles. No one can say for certain whose face it is. Some believe it is a great bodhisattva, a being of pure compassion. Some believe it is the king himself watching over his people for all time. Perhaps it is meant to be both at once. Jayavarman VII was a builder unlike any before him. In a single long reign, he raised more monuments than many of his predecessors combined. Temples for his mother, temples for his father, hospitals along the roads of the empire, and rest houses for travelers. The inscriptions he left behind speak, unusually, of care for the suffering of his people, of his wish to ease their pain. Under him, the empire reached close to its greatest extent, stretching across much of mainland Southeast Asia. It was, in many ways, the high point. The city was vast, the kingdom was strong, and the smiling faces looked out over all of it in serene and total confidence. But the highest point of anything is also the place from which the only direction left is down. The very things that had made Angkor great, its enormous scale, its endless building, its absolute dependence on a delicate web of water, were about to be tested by forces that no king, however mighty, could command. There was no single day on which Angkor fell. That is the first thing to understand. We are used to stories of cities destroyed in a night of fire and sudden ruin. The end of Angkor was not like that. It was slow and quiet, and in many ways it is still not fully understood. It took place over more than a century, and it was almost certainly caused not by one thing, but by many things gathering together at once. Consider the water first, because the water was everything. The whole life of the city rested on that vast and aging network of reservoirs and canals, built up and added to over 600 years. A system that large is also fragile. Channels silt up, embankments fail, repairs fall behind, and then the climate itself turned against them. By studying the rings of ancient trees, scientists have found that in the 14th and 15th centuries, this region was struck by decades of unusual weather. Long, severe droughts when the rains failed and the reservoirs ran low. And then, breaking the droughts, seasons of monsoon so violent that the floods tore through the canals and overwhelmed the defenses. For a city that lived or died by the steady control of water, it is hard to imagine a crueler pattern. Drought, then flood. Drought, then flood. The great machine that had fed the empire began to break down. There were human pressures too. The empire had embraced a new form of Buddhism, simpler and more personal, that did not call for the same vast temple building as before. The old reason to pour the kingdom's wealth and labor into monuments was fading. At the same time, the patterns of trade across Asia were shifting toward the sea, toward ports on the coast, away from a great inland capital far up the rivers. And there were wars. The kingdoms to the west had grown strong, and they pressed against Angkor again and again. In the 15th century, the records tell of the city being attacked and, at last, taken. So the kings made a decision that must have once seemed unthinkable. They left. The center of power moved south, closer to the great river and the sea, toward the area where the capital of Cambodia stands to this day. It was not a flight in a single panicked night. It was a long withdrawal, a shifting of the kingdom's heart from one place to another over many years. The reasons were tangled together. A failing water system, a changing climate, changing faith, changing trade, the pressure of enemies. No one of these alone brought down Angkor, but together, slowly, they emptied it. And once the people began to leave, the forest did the rest. The fields that were no longer tended grew wild. The canals that were no longer cleared filled with silt and weeds. The wooden city rotted back into the earth from which it came. And the trees, the patient trees, sent their roots into every crack and seam of the abandoned temples and began, over the centuries, to pull them slowly apart and slowly embrace them. The city did not so much die as fall asleep beneath the green. It is often said that Angkor was lost, and then dramatically rediscovered, as though it had vanished entirely from human memory. The truth is gentler and more interesting. Angkor was never truly lost. The Khmer people never forgot it. Through all the quiet centuries, monks still lived at Angkor Wat. Pilgrims still came. Local people still knew the great temples in the forest and told stories of the kings who had raised them. Travelers from distant lands passed through now and then and wrote, with wonder, of the ruins they had seen. What changed in the middle of the 19th century was that the wider world beyond Asia began to pay attention. A French naturalist named Henri Mouhot traveled here in 1860 in search of plants and insects and came upon the temples rising out of the jungle. He was overwhelmed by what he saw, and he wrote of it in his journals with such awe that, when those journals were published after his death, they captured the imagination of readers far away. He did not discover Angkor. The people who lived beside it had known it all along, but his words helped carry its image around the world, and so the modern fame of the city began. In the years that followed came the long, painstaking work of clearing and study and restoration that continues even now. The forest was cut back. Fallen stones were lifted and set in place. Scholars learned to read the old inscriptions and slowly pieced together the names of the kings and the meanings of the carvings. And yet, in certain places, the restorers made a deliberate choice. At one temple in particular, they left the great trees where they had grown, their pale roots still pouring over the walls, still cradling the stone. They left it as a reminder of how the whole city had once looked when it was found, a reminder of the long patience of the forest, and of how briefly, in the end, even the greatest works of people stand against it. So what remains today, when the visitors have gone and the evening comes? The towers of Angkor Wat, turning from gold to gray as the light fades. The faces of the Bayon, still smiling their faint and ancient smile into the gathering dark. The wide, still moats, holding the last of the daylight. The long galleries where the carved dancers wait, as they have waited for 800 years, for a festival that will never come again. And over all of it, the soft sounds of the forest returning. Insects, frogs, the wind moving through the high leaves. A city of 750,000 souls once filled this plain with noise and light and life. Kings believed they were building for eternity, raising their mountains of stone to last as long as the gods themselves. And in a way, they were right. The stones are still here. The faces are still smiling. It is only the people who have gone, the way people always do, leaving behind the quiet, beautiful, indifferent stone, and the patient green of the forest closing softly over everything they made. Rest now. The city has kept its silence for 600 years. It will keep it a while longer while you sleep.